Hello and welcome to the build video for the YoraHome 6550 CNC laser engraving machine. My name's Tom. I'll be walking you through this installation. A couple things to start out. Before you begin, you want to make sure you have all of the parts to the machine as well as all the necessary tools. Included in the kit is a set of metric hex keys. These should allow you to assemble the machine. In the interest of time, I am going to be using my own set. Just for the video, there is absolutely no difference other than mine have handles and are round. Additionally, there's a few things you're going to need to do before you start that I highly recommend that aren't actually covered in the manual. When you remove the plastic wrap from these rails, you'll notice from the milling process, when they tap the M5 and M6 screws, they leave metal shavings. So you're going to want to use canned air or some other means to clean them. You can use paper towels, anything, but you definitely want to clean those off. Additionally, I would familiarize yourself with the manual. Ensure you have all of the pieces that are indicated in the first part 1 of the manual, which includes pictures, quantities, and details about each part. I also highly recommend labeling the bags containing each nut and each bolt. Highly recommended. That will make installation much more straightforward for you. Okay, I'm going to assemble this. I'm not going to fast forward. We're going to do this from start to finish. So I have the machine here. I have a manual here. And we're just going to get right to it. So step 1 is to assemble the frame. For that, you're going to need these 4 rails. These are the X. And these are the Y. So lay them out. Like so. As you can see in the manual, you use these corner braces. And you'll be using some M5 with the T-nuts. You need 2 per corner. So I highly recommend just laying out each corner piece. And then commensurate M5 bolts, washers, and T-nuts. So just dump them out. So we need 2 per corner. We need 2 washers and then 2 T-nuts. And these are the 10mm long ones, if I didn't say that before. All right. Additionally, you're going to need the proper driver, which is going to be the second to biggest from the keys that they give you. I'm going to use one with a handle. It's just faster. It's no different. It just lets me do this faster for the video. So the first step is take a bolt, put it in the washer, put it through, and then you can actually put the nut right on the back. Now the nut goes this way with the rounded side pointing out and the flat side pointing in. You can actually make these up in advance. Because of the way these T-nuts work, they will slide right into the rail. So you can put your bolts and washers, and then do this. It's actually, I think, will be a lot faster than trying to do them one at a time. So you can do that in advance. I didn't, because I want to show you guys start to finish how this process works. So again, the flat part, the threads on the outside go pointing towards the bolt, and the rounded side goes facing the rail. You're welcome to fast forward through this video. I will try not to put much dialogue in between that you would miss if you were to do so. So if you want to skip forward, you're welcome to do so. But like I said, I wanted to keep this video basically complete so that you can see the entire process. So that's what I'm planning on doing. This machine is not difficult to build. It shouldn't take very long. Also, this video is only meant to cover the mechanical aspects of this build. I'm not going to be doing any of the electronic software related stuff, so we'll get the controller installed, but that's where we're going to stop. We can either do the software pieces in a separate video, or we'll see. I'm also not going to cover any upgrades in this video. This particular machine includes the 15-watt laser module. I can demonstrate a couple different ways to mount that, but I'm just going to show. Alright, so we have our 4 corner braces basically assembled. So the way this works is you slide the T-nut, which is this guy, into the slot, and you get it lined up. Now, let me just give this a little turn so I can kind of tighten it. These should self-tighten. They should turn by themselves in the hole. You can look and verify that they've turned. And when you assemble this, the way I recommend doing it is just get it in there enough so that it's holding, and then line up your other piece. Now you can look on the instructions, but the X goes to the inside of the Y. The double rail is the Y. The single rail is the X axis. So place that in there, goes in the top. Okay, now if you have this square, you can go ahead and tighten it. You basically want this end to be nice and flush with the end. Once you've done that, you can tighten the other side. Okay. You don't have to really push on them, just enough so there's no flex. We're basically going to repeat that process for each corner. So I'm going to tighten this all the way. I'm going to get this lined up. And then I'm going to square it off. When I like this here in this corner, I'm going to tighten it on that side. And this side I'm going to loosen just a little. I'm going to get it nice and lined up, and I'm going to tighten it again. And again, you can look down to make sure those T-nuts are square, the way they're designed. And every time I've done one of these, it lines up. So again, the proper insulation, this is in the top of the tube. So we're going to follow that same process for these other two corners. Loosen this guy hair. Move it down. More flush. Like that. All right, last corner. This one I want to loosen a hair because it's not any flex now because the other corners are all assembled. So. And get this flush. I'm using my finger to feel to make sure it's flush. Okay, frame is built. Next step, step 2, this is acrylic sheet A assembly. So, you'll notice I've labeled these, makes it much easier. Put that there for now. This is A. So, first thing we do, it's a very glorious job of removing the paper. This paper is to protect it from getting scratched in transport. All right, that's one side. Here's A. Now we're going to orient it according to the instructions. And we're going to grab two M5 by 30 bolts. So see, I've labeled them, so that's these guys. And spacers. Four of those are required. And we need 4 wheels. And 4 nuts. All right. So, take the A plate. Notice the 2 holes are in the back. We slide 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to give these guys a little help with this. You want them to go all the way through. All right. Next we have the spacers. 1, 2. You must wish you had more than one extra hand for this part. And then the wheels. And we'll just do the nut for each of these so that they don't fall. Okay, now you're going to want, you can use a pair of pliers, you can use a little adjustable wrench if you have one. I think a pair of needle nose pliers is probably best for this. So you want to hold the nut on one side and then give this tightening. Now you don't want to really torque these down a lot, you just want them tight. All right, and these wheels should spin freely. Okay, and that step is done. All right. Next, we're going to work with acrylic sheet B and stepper motor. This is for the Y. Of course, we got to remove this paper, which sometimes is easier said than done. Now, this is where we're going to be installing a stepper motor. And this is one area where I think we want to add some revisions to the manual, which I'm actually going to talk to Jim and Alvin about. But the technically the connector orientation on the stepper doesn't really matter a lot, other than there's obviously some advantages to pointing it in the direction of where the wire is going to go. Alternately, if you do end up upgrading to drag chains, then the orientation of the wire is a lot more important. I'm not going to be covering upgrades in this particular video. I do have a number of upgrades available out on Thingiverse. I'm going to be adding a few more. My machine is heavily customized, and I have provided the files that I created to do those upgrades out on Thingiverse. If you have access to a 3D printer, you can print them for yourself. I have a lot of updating to do. I've actually got a version 2 of the drag chain setup that I've upgraded to. I have an adjustable Z-axis plate that I've designed, and there's a few other little things that I've come up with. We're also working on some new projects, so there will be more to come. But certainly, if you're interested, go check out Thingiverse. If you're not familiar with 3D printing, maybe you've never been to Thingiverse before, but it's a really cool place, and you may find yourself extremely interested in 3D printing after. Okay, so this is the right side gantry end. So this is where the stepper motor mounts. If you're just running the wires plain, my recommendation is to point the connector that way towards the back of the machine. This here is the back right, and that's where the controller is going to be if you assemble this according to these instructions. So with the controller mounted back here, you want this pointing back. Some people have their wires going up to like maybe a rubber band type contraption to hold them out of the way. If you do that, maybe you want it up. I'll point this one back, but this is where you make that decision, okay? So you're gonna need the stepper motor, and then we're also going to need some M5 by 30 bolts, because we have to do the wheels. So let's do the wheels first, then we'll do the steppers. So we need 4 wheels, and then we need basically the same thing we just did on the other side. What we're building is the ends of the gantry. So the piece that holds the laser is called the gantry, all right? And these go on these ends and slide back and forth for the gantry to ride on. So this was, sheet A was the left side, sheet B is the right side. The right side's the one with the motor. So we're basically replicating what we just built here, but this side has a motor in addition to the wheels. So it's the same hardware. This is our remaining M5 by 30 bolts. So we're going to take the sheet. This is very important to orient it the right way, because these 2 holes are where the gantry, the 2040, actually mounts to. This guy right here, he's going to go there. So it's important you have this right. So we want the wheels on this side. And again, it's easier to screw these in now. That way you're not using the nut to do it. sometimes they don't push through easy. You can just screw them in. But if you get them nice and flush, then you'll have the minimum amount of work to do when you're on the other side. So, spacers. Wheels. Nuts. All right, so next we're just going to tighten these. And again, you don't want to crank down too much. You just want to get them tight. There is a bearing in the middle here, and this is only acrylic, so you don't really want to bury that bolt in there. You just want it snug. Now you don't want it loose because you don't want the wheels to come off. But, you know, this doesn't require huge amounts of torque. Alright. So we've got the wheels on. So this is going to go on this way. So next we have the motor, and this is where this connector comes into play, because you're going to this motor can go any way you want. You want to orient it the way you want your wires to go. So the controller's back there. So my recommendation is it's going to go here. Now, this is the hardware set we're going to use for this. What this does is this backs the motor away from the right side plate. Okay. Almost lost that one. So these guys go in the opposite direction. So you're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you need a different size hex for these. I believe it's the second to smallest for this one. If you're using the ones that come with a kit, second to smallest. Here's where it gets a little tricky. You need to get spacers on. But yeah, you don't want them to fall off once you've already done. So yeah. Sometimes it helps to have an extra set of hands. That one just went flying. You get it. Unfortunately, they all have to be on to go to the next step. Excuse me. All right. Which is to install the stepper. So, point the connector in the direction that you want it to go in, and then push it up against so the spacers don't fall. And you can actually just kind of hand tighten these so that they're set. And once you got a couple of them, they won't move. And that's when you can grab your hex key, or in my case this driver, and install it. And this is another case where you do not need to torque these way down. You just want them tight. That's all. Just tight. And go around a few times, because when there's a square, sometimes they loosen up as it pulls against the plate. Okay, now if you look at your stepper shaft, there's actually a flat spot. We're at a point where you need to install something called the coupler. This is going to join the right side to the left side, which you'll see in a little bit. Actually, I gotta grab that part. What I would recommend before you install this is find the key you're gonna need to tighten it, which is the smallest. And you're gonna want to line up. There's 4 set screws. 2 are for the motor side and 2 are for the rod that goes in here. So what you're gonna want to do is one of these 2 screws, it doesn't matter which, you want to line up with the flat spot in the stepper motor. And you're going to push that on. Also, this doesn't need to go all the way in. It can go out a bit. I would tighten this down, but not too tight, because this will probably require some adjustment when you do the step that couples it. So just tighten the screws down enough where you don't lose the coupler for now. But I wouldn't tighten them all the way at this stage. Okay. And that's that. So this is the right side. This is the left side. Okay. We're to step 4. This is where we build the head. Let me grab that. This rod. Forgot to grab it earlier. So, next to these pieces, this is C, it's the right side, where the motor goes. This is D, the laser side. Of course, you have to take the paper off. It takes almost as long as building a machine. Now, again, this video is meant to be instructional. I don't work for YoraHome at this point. I just kind of help out a little bit. I've been sort of an avid enthusiast customizing my 6550, and kind of volunteered to do this because I saw some people struggling a little bit assembling this machine correctly. And, you know, in my opinion, the best way to prevent that is a build video. So I kind of volunteered to do one. But this machine is out of the box. It's stock. There's nothing special about it. It is brand new. It is it's actually a second machine for me. I'm going to be using it to do some testing of some customizations. But it's fresh out of the box, and honestly, I mean, as you can see from the paper, I haven't assembled this, so you know, this is a candid, I'll call it, build video. I didn't sort of pre-assemble and make sure everything was perfect, and I've done no prep work beyond labeling, which I normally do when I build these types of things. And I intentionally, you know, I'm showing everyone that so they can decide whether or not that is a better way to do things. Everyone has their own way of doing things. So by all means, you know, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm demonstrating how I do, and I've been fairly successful putting stuff together over the years, so hopefully it helps some people. And for others, I think it's more just understanding what everything is and where it goes. So before you build it and familiarize yourself with these machines, this looks like pieces of plastic and nuts and bolts. Nothing really makes sense. So as myself included, when I was building this, like the stepper motor orientation, I ended up having to actually take them off and move them, because after I put it together and kind of realized how things pointed, I didn't like it. And I had sort of wished I had that insight prior to putting it together. So that's where I have the opportunity of conveying things like that. There's a few other things as we put this together I am going to cover that I think will be useful information for folks. So the laser side has this slot in it. The stepper side has this hole in it for the stepper. I believe you have to put the stepper on first on this guy, because you can't get at the bolts. So in this case, the stepper is going to mount directly. Okay, so here's where we're at sort of decision point again. If you're going to have the wire kind of go to a rubber band, which most folks seem to do something like that, you're going to want it pointing straight up. So that's kind of what I recommend in this case. This is the orientation. This is the bottom of the plate. This is the top of the plate. So that would be up. And we need M3 by 8. 4 of them. And this would be the second smallest key if you're using the stock bits. And this guy you can build nice and flat. So again, I'm pointing the connector straight up in this particular build. Later I will probably be testing some drag chain stuff on this, and so I may move it, but for you guys, I'm just going to install this thing bone stock. And again, I'll repeat, don't put too much torque on these, just enough so they're tight. You know, you don't want them loose, but you don't need to push them through the plastic, because this stuff will crack. Acrylic is pretty hard. All right. So the reason we have to do that first is once you put this plate on, you can't get at these screws. There's no through holes. Which is a pain, because you have to take this all apart if you want to turn this. So make sure you put this connector the way you want it on this guy, unless you want to rebuild this whole thing later. Okay, so this is going to call for the remainder of our spacers, our longer M5 by 45 bolts. This is different because this actually rides around the gantry. So here's our gantry, which goes this way. These wheels go here and here, but we've got a plate on the back and the front that's going to ride on this. That's what we're building now, just for reference. And the bolts go in from this side. I will point one other thing out that isn't generally covered in the manual. You'll see when you look at these holes, the bottom ones are round, the top ones are a little oval. The reason for that is you actually want this to ride tightly on the rail. You don't want it so tight that it provides resistance, but you do want it tight enough where there's no play, because play will cause inaccuracies. So I'll show that later, but I do want to point that out now while I have the plate, that these top holes are slightly oval, and it's so that you can adjust the width here when you're putting it on the gantry. So just something to bear in mind. So we're going to need these guys and these guys. And then we're going to need, there's 4 of these guys left. So this is what we're building. So we put, and again, this is the front, this is where the laser goes. Let me think about this. I think you gotta mount the laser first. Let's do that. So this is the 15-watt laser. Now, it has this control board. Now, while we're working on this, I'm actually just going to gently pull these guys out. They're color coded, they're really hard, and they only go in one way, but we're going to get the power board out of the way. Okay, so this is our laser. The 15-watt lasers in the original kits had a fixed focus, and so you had to use this metal thing to fix the focus on the laser. This guy is adjustable. They're newer, all their newer lasers, anything you buy now is adjustable, so you don't need to worry as much about that. Some of the documentation you find out there references it, so I'm just kind of letting everybody know. So there's two M38 bolts used for this. Let me get those out. And you don't want to center it. Okay, there's 3 holes, just line it right up. You're going for the center hole. And we have to do this now because once we put this assembly together, you can't get it that one. You can get it this one, you can't get it that one because the stepper's in the way, see? So we're gonna do this now. All right. Again, just tight enough. This doesn't need to be super tight. Okay. So next, spacers. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is the trickiest one because you got a lot to put on here. Wheels. Spacers again. And this is where this guy goes. So this is top. So I'll do the outside ones because I can touch them. And then flip her on her back. Do these ones. There we go. Takes a little wiggling, but we're going to put on the nuts just to kind of lock things in. That bolt's kind of goofy. There we go. So. Now these guys you want square. So what I've done is I've kind of put it on the edge of a table that holds it nice and square. Backwards. All right. Just like with the other ones, you don't need to go crazy tight on these. In fact, you're probably going to loosen the top ones because, as I mentioned before, when you're putting this on the gantry, it might need some adjustments. All right, with too tight, you can lay it on its side and just gently do the other two. So these are the top ones. These are the ones that are, you can see the play up and down. For now, I'm just gonna snug it up, but what you're gonna end up, we're gonna do it later. I'll show you. But we need to make an adjustment, most likely, so that it's tight to the gantry. As you can see, this machine is not super complicated. It really doesn't take a very long time to assemble. All right, that is done. Now, okay. So here's our, we're gonna start doing belts. So the belts and the wires all come in this bag. So, separate them out. There should be 3 belts. Move the wires over here. Now, if you hold the belts all together, 2 are going to be the same and 1's going to be different. So, you'll notice 1 is a little longer than the other 2. And that's because that's this guy. That's going on our X. That's for the gantry. The 2 slightly shorter ones are Y's, and they're going to go on either side like that. So the one we're working with now is the gantry, which is this. So this is where we do what I was talking about. Now, orientation on this machine is very important. This is the front, back, left, right. This is going to go on the right side. This is going to go on the left side. This is the gantry. The control board's going to go back here. The laser is always in front. The stepper is in back. So I'm going to slip this on. Now, best bet. Now we're not, I mean, the instructions say put the timing belt on. We're going to do that, but this is where Tom's tips and tricks comes in. This you do not want to have wobble. Okay? I don't know if you can hear it or see it, but this has a teeny bit of play in it right now. Okay? So it's free on the rail, which is good, but it's got play. I can rotate it just a little bit. So this is where I was talking about. What we can do is we can loosen these top 2. Just a bit. Not much. Just want them just so they're enough where we can squeeze these together. All right. So just kind of put some pressure on it. Do the same for the back. Just squeeze it, squeeze the wheels together. Check now. See, that still has play. So this is where you're going to tinker a little bit. This side's good. This side I can pull up and down. So when you pull up and down here, there's no play, but back here there's play. This still needs to be squeezed. So I'm just going to kind of push it down. All right, try tightening this again. Yeah, so still very, very free, but there's no play in this head here, okay? This is something only a build video can show you, but this is really important because you want this to be accurate. This is moving back and forth. It has quite a bit of mass to it. And if there's play in this, of any kind, it can tip, and it's going to cause weirdness in your burns. So this is really, it's tinkery, but it's really important. This is important stuff. Just realized I forgot to put the pulley on the stepper. So I might have to take this apart. I think you can get it on. We're going to check. Now again, you want to look for the flat side in the motor. So I'm going to turn the motor so the flat side is up. So you can just see it there. And then again, doesn't matter which, but one of the set screws needs to be lined up. Now, it's okay that I didn't install this already because this is another little tip, okay? You need this gap here to line up at the center of this tray because there's a belt we're about to install. It's going to go under this wheel, up over this pulley, and back under. You want this centered in the track. So I just look straight down and I line it up. So you can line up with a wheel, you can line up with a channel, you can do all the above, however you want to do it. But that looks good there. So you can see I've got this pulley lined up with this wheel and this wheel and this channel. Super important. And then tighten your set screw down. Before I tighten, I always like to double check because things love to move. Pretty good. So I'll tighten down a little more. Now these, you can strip these real easy, so don't put too much torque, especially on the one on the flat side, because there's nowhere for that one to go. So just enough where it's touching. You'll strip these right out, so just be very gentle doing this, just enough so it's tight. Because there's a flat side, there's nowhere on this one for this to go. All right, that's done. Now, this is actually kind of tricky. This goes in this groove here, and this is what drives things. What I've actually found is an easy way to do this, relatively speaking, is stick something in the groove behind, like I'm doing. I'm upside down. So flat side, smooth side, up, groove side down when you do this. But stick something underneath like so, and if you push the belt through, it'll actually go right where you want it. See? And we're going to run it so it goes underneath this wheel, over the pulley, and then under the other wheel. And here's what you can do. You can hold this down and then move this. See that? And then pull this along. Now this is going to be longer, which is just fine. So I mean, I like to have it about even, like that. Okay. So here's where we're at. We have installed the laser head and stepper. We've adjusted it so that it's tight. There's no play in this. We've installed the pulley and lined it up. And we've got the belt installed as well. So next, and then we're going to secure it. I'm working with this. I'm going to have a 3D printed design to replace these. I'm not a huge fan because these basically just push through. These screws just push through the belt, and there's a better way. So I'm going to design something to be 3D printed for this, but for the time being and for the sake of this video, and I'll just use this. You know, we don't need to use any special tools here, but you can insert it from the end if you want, and just keep that little piece of metal square in that groove and tighten it. So now we're getting to another sort of fiddly part. All right. And you don't have that, you definitely don't have to tighten down a whole lot, just enough so the belt doesn't pull out. So here's where we get to belt tension. So you're going to pull the belt through. You're going to set up another one of these. So I'm using these come in a bag all by themselves. They're these little threaded, sort of like T-nuts, and these really small. These might be M3 or M2. Screws, but again, I'm going to slide that in, and if this nut turns on you, you can use another one of the keys to hold it square. Sometimes it will do that. These nuts I have been able to push them down and then get them to turn. There's just enough space usually, and if it doesn't work, move it in the channel, but you'd be able to if need be. All right, so right now this is too loose, okay? You can hear the belts just rolling. You can see the tension here. There's just a lot of play. So I'm gonna use this side since this is the last one I did. I did not tighten this all the way. I was actually using this little key. I did not tighten this all the way intentionally because this is where you got to tension the belt. So pull the belt until it feels like you don't want to pull too tight, but pull it till, you know, there's no slack in it. Let's start there. I'm usually pretty good at this. You want to move this back and forth gently. And you're going to want to watch where the belt meets the pulley to see whether there's any slop. So if you're pushing it and on one side it bulges, or absolutely if it skips, then you know you're too loose. And the other thing you can do is push on the belt here, just gently, just to see if there's a lot of give. You don't want it too tight. It causes actually a lot of resistance, and then this won't move freely. So you just want, I mean, you can see I can move the belt by pushing on it, so it's not too tight, but it doesn't bulge or anything when I move it back and forth. And you can feel it still moves freely. I mean, there's resistance now with the motor, but you can feel it moves freely. The other thing we're checking when we're doing this is that pulley. This here, that we have that centered. You'll notice going back and forth it will ride from one side to the other. That's actually good, because that shows that you probably have it centered. You don't want it rubbing up against either of these too much. If it is, you can loosen these two a little bit and then adjust this gap as needed, but you want this centered. It's really important. That feels good. Again, these don't have to be, these belt tensioners don't, you don't have to push too hard. They're actually, those screws are going right through the rubber. So it doesn't take much for them to hold. But there. So now we're fully connected. So set it, you can set it here because it's wider so that it's not putting pressure on this. Okay. So next we're going to be putting the gantry ends on. So essentially we're finishing the assembly of the gantry at this time. That is done by this piece, the A, and this piece, the B plates. And this is where we use some of these big M6. So I need a total of 4 of these. This is the one thing, this is my biggest driver, so that I'm gonna have to use this. The good news is there's not a lot to this. So here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna put one in. I'm gonna turn the gantry. So I have this oriented correctly at this time. Stepper in the back, laser in the front. This is the way the end side goes, where the 2 holes are to the rear. This is very important so the gantry has the right center of gravity. So we can turn the gantry. We'll sit on these rails. And in this case, I have enough space here with this table to put this on. So gently, I'm just going to thread this in enough so it stays. I'm actually going to get my second screw and install that. Now, this is another step where you want to be really careful. Don't tighten these down all the way yet, because you want to get this square. And to do that, you're going to look at this, you're going to turn it until this is flat. There's not much play in these, so it shouldn't take much, but and this is another case. You don't need to torque down on these a lot. You just want them tight. There's nothing on this machine that gets torqued down hard. Everything is just so it's tight. So that's one side. I'm just going to rotate this. I'm gently going to lean it on the wheels. Now, maintaining the same orientation where the wheels are down. I'm going to put this side on. I'm going to move this just so it's probably in the camera a little better. Too far. It's got wheels. So same deal, we're going to tighten this enough where we can get it square. So, once we have it close, I'm going to check it here for square. And we're going to tighten it. Again, don't over tighten this stuff, just tighten it to the point where, you know, there's no playing it, but you don't need to really tighten it. Okay. That step's done. Now we're going to put it back in the correct orientation. Okay, laser in the front. The gantry support should be on the rear side of the A and B. And then you see where the wheels are. Now if you noticed on these plates, there's actually some play here as well in the top. It's to adjust here as well, just like we did there. We need to do that on both of these too. So now they're going to have us install this. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to lift this side and we're going to slide those wheels on. One set only. We're going to slide those on. All right, now we should be able to get the other set of wheels on. All right. I'm checking for play. And I do have some. I have a little bit on this side. I think the back's okay. This side doesn't look too bad. All right, we can't make any adjustments right now because we got to put the feet on. We also have to install the linear access thing, which we can do here. It's this pole. So what this does is it takes the power from the motor on this side and it applies it to a belt on this side so that there's no torsion. Otherwise it wouldn't move smoothly. So this bar is like an axle. Okay. And in order to position it correctly, they give you this little bearing and this little spacer. So if you want, first you'll slide the bearing into here. Push it in so it's all the way in. There's a lip on it so it will stop. Next, there's going to be the spacer that's going to go in between, but we need to put...
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
My watch is listening to me. We need a pulley first. And if you look at the picture, you'll see that the pulley in this case goes in this orientation on this side. All right. So it's pulley, spacer, and we don't need to tighten this down. And then we slide it through this bearing. If it doesn't go in, which it's not for me right now, what you can actually do is pull this out. So you can pop the bearing out. Now remember the orientation. The lip, the bearing needs to go to the inside. But what we can actually do is install the bearing here. And then we can push this through that hole there. All right, and just push this in enough. We can finish it later. So next, we're going to line it up here with the coupler. We're going to push it in. And over here, on this side, you can now push this bearing all the way through until it's flush with the left side gantry support. And then push this in until it stops. So it's hitting the shaft on the motor. So the spacer is going to go there. Pulley's going to go here. Now, just like here, we're going to have to line this pulley up with the slot. Now, because they have a spacer in here, this side's just going to basically go flush against it. But do not tighten this yet. And I'm going to show you why later. leave that loose. Oh, we forgot the pulley on this side. You guys are seeing all kinds of oopsies. Now this is very important. I didn't put this on because I wanted to show you this. This pulley actually goes on in the same orientation as this one. They don't go opposite. It goes this way because this has to get up in where the groove is. So you got to put this in this way. It's okay. We can just slide it on here. So notice how that went on, where the set screws are on the left side. All right. This is also loose right now too. So we have this assembled. We now have the order in which they had you do this. It was just before we put this on here. It was the last step. It doesn't really matter. I actually like it on here because everything is spaced, and this is now held on to something, so it's actually a little easier to work on, but whatever order you want to do it in. So we're going to do the motor side first, and we're going to line this up with the slot. I'm going to turn it so I can get at the set screws. So I'm going to push this rod all the way in. I'm not doing this one yet. I'm doing this one. Now, because there's no flat spot, and I may go back and make a flat spot on mine, to be honest with you. But because there's no flat spot, you do have to tighten these pretty good. Again, this is stripped, so you can't tighten it too much. But because there's two of them, it gets a pretty good bite. So we're going to tighten that. Now we're going to give this a tug, and we're just going to make sure everything's tight, which it is. Next, we're going to look at our alignment here. This is very important. I'm not sure if you can see it. Turn the machine. But this is, again, just like we did up here, we're going to line up this pulley, the grooves where the belt's going to go, with this groove here with the wheels. This should be centered. So the center of the wheel should go straight through the center of that to there, or again, when you look down, this should line up here. So I'm going to eyeball that. Same deal, just tighten them down as much as you feel comfortable, but don't over torque them or you'll strip them. And stripping them is bad. Alright, so you can push, you can kind of twist it holding the coupler and feel that it's tight. Now, this is super important. Don't tighten this one yet. Just leave it free. And I'll show you why when we get to that step. So, I'm done with this because we put it on the gantry. Now we're going to do the belts on the Y. Same process as we did here, no different. A smooth side up. You're going to feed it, and then, like I said, that little trick, you push something into this groove and generally get it to come up for you, just like that. So under the wheel, over the pulley, under the wheel, and just like I showed you before, you can hold this and do that. It feeds it right through for you. So I'm gonna have to stand to get to the back of this. Same deal, we're gonna shoot for even, and then same hardware as before. These little T-nut things. I'm gonna set the back one, and then the front one This is the one I'm going to use to adjust the tension because it's just easier to reach. So you don't want these right at the end. You want to bring them in just a little. And again, you don't need to torque it down. I mean, you'll feel you pull on this belt, it doesn't move. You don't want to send that screw all the way straight through the rubber. These aren't my favorite things. Again, actually I was looking this earlier today for some preliminary designs for this to print so that you don't have this, because I don't really like how this works. Now, here's where we're going to adjust our tension. So we don't want this tight just yet. So I'm going to pull on it, and I'm just going to kind of, I want a little bit of give. You don't want to pull too hard on this. I'll tell you right now. And this is where it's a little tricky too, because this came loose. We have that in. I'm pulling on it a little bit. I'm just kind of feeling for that tension. Alright. So I'm going to double check. So this has a little bit of play, but you can see when I push it, this bar is moving. So it's not the belt, it's actually this play. That's okay. I'm going to lift it up. I'm going to move it back and forth. I'm going to check it for center, make sure the belt's riding in the center. Looks okay. It's riding a little bit on the inside, but I think that's just the angle. When the motor moves it, you watch it, and I bet it'll be in the center because visually it's pretty centered. Now, this side, we have a belt here. So we're going to use that same trick where we're going to feed this in and then stick a tool behind. And that one went perfect. That's how it's supposed to be. Now remember, this pulley's loose, and it's supposed to be. It's another Tom's tips and tricks. All right. Leave this pulley loose. This pulley should still be loose. You can tension it while it's loose. The tension on it isn't going to change when you tighten it. You need one of these guys. I hate these things. There we go. Now again, I'm going to use this one to tension, so I'm just going to get them even, and I'm just tightening this up just a hair. That one is going to get moved once I get the back one in. Turned on me. Man, I was doing so well with these. So as these turn, you can use a tool to hold them straight. Okay. Now, same deal with the tension. So this is in, but watch what happens when I pull this belt. Came out a bit. But I don't like it that far in. So loosen it and bring it back. Now I'm feeling the tension right now. That feels pretty good. I want just a little teeny bit of flex here. Not a lot, just a little. This is where you get more like an art than a science. It's a feel thing. But as you play with the machine, you'll learn. Here's what happens. If these belts are too tight, this may not move at all. Or it'll move, and as it gets closer to the edge, because of the way the tension works, there's more play because it's rubber. In the center, because this is a rubber belt, it has the most flexibility. So it may move here. And as you get towards the ends, there's less flexibility in this shorter piece of rubber. And it adds tension, and if it's too much, it'll start binding and the machine won't have full flex. So that's a troubleshooting technique. If you're finding your machine works in the middle, but when you get towards the ends it gets like stuck, your belt's probably too tight. Now don't forget, this pulley here is still loose, so we're going to leave it that way. Alright, belts are in. So now we're at the point where we're going to install the control board, which is this guy right here. If you go on Thingiverse, I do have a cover for this available, because unlike the 3018 control board, this guy doesn't come with a case. It's just an open circuit board. I guess they figure because you're using a laser, there's not the mess you have with CNC, so you know, less chance of something getting into the board. But I don't know. I'm not a fan of open electronics, especially on this type of machine. So I did design a case for this. You can 3D print for. I mean, if you have a 3D printer or access to one, you can print it for free. And it has actual buttons, because good luck hitting reset and then this power button. So it has physical buttons. They're a little hanky because they're really tiny, but they're all part of that 3D printed design. So we need that guy, and this gets a little interesting. We're going to use these M3/8s, and we need 8 total. There's 4 in the front and 4 in the back. We also need these standoffs. 4 of these. Now I'm going to assemble it all in front of me, and we'll stick it on the back at the end. So hang on. This guy. This. So screw it straight through. You add a standoff. Just hand tighten this for now. Screw straight through. We add a standoff. Screw straight through. My heat's coming on. Hot water. And last but not least, screw, standoff. All right. Now we need F. That's what this mounts to. F is both the rear right foot and the mount for the board. Apologize for my hot water kicking on. That's definitely what it is. All right. So this is going to screw on this way. This is the foot on the back. So these 4 holes here are for the control board. And the control board gets oriented like this. So this is the back. So the control board goes on like this. All right. So if you're looking at it this way, it would look like that. But just so that you have the right orientation, this is going to screw on the back like that. This is the foot that goes in the corner. So we've got 1, the other thing I found is these 2 screws are a little too long for these standoffs, so probably gonna be a little loose. Excuse me. But it's not a big deal because the control board's not really moving. So just if you use my 3D printed case, it actually makes up the difference in the gap. That was one of the other reasons I designed it. So when you install it, it will actually pull that in, and then you won't have any loosey-goosey screws. But you can't even really tighten these all the way because it's these 2 screws are meeting in the middle and there's too much of a gap. So it'll be a little loose. Just print my case and you'll be happy. But this is the correct orientation. This is actually the way it's going to mount on the back. And this step has us install the remainder of the feet. So ear the other 3 feet. This is the 4th foot in the back. So we're going to pull the paper. And this is great because this gets the machine up off the wheels, which I don't really care for. Now these 3 feet are all the same because you can flip them over for each orientation. So for this side, they're going to go like that. And you use these 2 holes, and then you flip one over, and it's going to be this side. So we'll do that, and these are where we use those other big M6 screws. Now you'll notice we don't have the power board connected to this yet. I am going to cover that as well. And we haven't tightened this, and I'm going to cover why once this is up on its feet. So I didn't forget. That is intentional. We need this to be up off the table for us to do those steps. Well, not the power board, but I just don't like leaving it on the wheels. It's not good for it. So, again, we're going to use the remainder of these M6s. Just to a corner. But we're almost done. So, all right. Start right here. This is where I gotta use this because I don't have this size. You can square this up if you like. Less important. I mean, it's nice if it's flat, but if you're building this on a table, it's probably just going to naturally go square. And you can visually see if it's square up here. So, but as it sits on a table, you'll know if it's off because it won't sit flat, and then you can make adjustments as needed. But I'm not messing with that too much for here. Let's just get her together at this point. like when I get it up on its feet. Should feel like it's almost done, which it is. I think all we have really left is the wiring and those few little bits I told you about. Okay. I'm gonna pull this away. And I need this guy. Now, of course, the control board's in the back, so it'll be kind of hard to see when we do the wiring. So we might turn it. We'll see when we get there, which we're almost at that part. Hit my head. That's foot. All right, that's installed. So, we're on our feet. Okay. So this is the wiring. So we're almost done. So I'm going to cover a couple things here. Both belts are tensioned. I would normally adjust, so there's play here, okay? So I would, I'm not going to do it. I already showed you how to do it here. But basically the same steps here you'll want to do here. You want to do that before you tension this belt. It's not a big deal. If you loosen this, like I loosen this right now, and then loosen the top two, squeeze them together and then tighten them. And then do the same here. You don't want any play this way in here. So actually I can demonstrate so you can see how that twists? It shouldn't twist, okay? If you watch where this wheel is, you can see this play. So there could be some play here and some play here. So how you adjust that is you remove these, or you loosen these a hair, just like we did here. You squeeze them together and tighten them. And keep doing it until, you don't want them too tight. You don't want them so tight they bind. But with it on there, it's really, you wouldn't be able to squeeze it that hard. If you took it off and squeezed them together and then tried to put it back on, you can actually do it too tight, which is why I prefer doing it on the machine. But you can't make that adjustment until the feet are on, because you need this to be able to be free. So I'm not doing that now. There's no reason to. I will do it after, but I'm going to end up taking this apart anyway because I have some other stuff to do with it. But you definitely want to adjust this gap. You don't want any, you don't want this kind of play, which you can see there is some. Now, this is loose, and I'll tell you why. This is also in the manual. This is Tom tip. This you want perfectly square with this. And if you tighten these two arbitrarily, the teeth in these will actually determine where they're going to grab this belt. And if you just tighten them, they could be off a bit. Which one, it's going to make this bind some, because it's going to affect this twist. And two, it's gonna cause wear and tear on your mechanicals. So here's what you do, and that's why I left this pulley loose, because that lets us move this freely and let it naturally find a sink. And what you want to do is bring it all the way to one side, and you actually want to measure from here to here, maybe right at the end, and then from here to here. So I will, I should have grabbed a ruler. Let me grab a ruler. So the idea is you want this to be square, and I want access to one of these screws for this step, and you want your tool in your hand. And now we're going to do two things. We're going to make sure this is all the way in, this pulley all the way against the spacer. We're going to tighten this just so that it's touching. All right, and then back it off. So get it to touch, and back it off so it's loose. And then what we're going to do is we're going to measure in millimeters from here to here. So I've got 40 millimeters or 4 centimeters. So I'm going to come over here, and you'll actually notice I've got 42. So we're off. So I'm going to pull this in until we're at 40, which we are now. Now I'm going to double check and make sure we didn't move on this side. We didn't. So making sure we're at 40, and I just picked 40 because that's kind of where it ended up. I'm going to have to recheck that. And I'm not going to go too crazy here because I'm going to take this apart. But yeah, we're still at 40. So now we're at 40. Now I'm going to tighten this. Alright, let's double check. It kind of felt like it moved on me. Alright, 40 right now there. And 40 there. So I'm going to move it gently because I've only got one set screw on the left side. Back it off. I'm going to push from the center. So I'm basically going to get to 40 here. I'm going to make sure I've got 40 here. And I actually, it did slide a bit. So I'm going to, this is where, again, I mean, this doesn't take long. This is just a little tinkery. This really doesn't take, so I just turn that just enough so it's not biting anymore. So I want this at 40. We're going to move it again like that. I'm going to get that at 40. And then that at 40. We're going to double check 40 here, which we're still at 40. Now I'm holding it this time, so hopefully it won't move. But now I've tightened it. That should do it. So we're going to move it back and forth from the center. But the idea here is, because this coupler goes through this pulley, which is tight, which is on the belt, and then this rod, and now this is tight on this belt, you should be able to move it back and forth. It should stay in the same position. And that's what we were just adjusting by doing what I did. So now we're at 40 here, and we're at 40 here. So those should stay in sync. Now we're going to want to tighten the other set screw down. This one's not even in, which is fine. So I can turn this. And again, you can't over tighten these or you'll strip them right out, because those pulleys are just aluminum. They're just very thin threads in aluminum where these set screws. So what'll happen is the aluminum pulley is what actually strips. The set screw doesn't, because it's harder. So you want to just tighten both of these. And again, you just want it tight enough where it doesn't move. But again, something on the manual, but you want to leave this pulley loose and do the process I just did. That guarantees that this and this are parallel with each other, so that they always move at the same distance. So there'll be no binding, And then you can feel this should be very smooth. This should be very smooth. So the only binding I feel is from the motor. Okay, next step. We're almost there. You've got wires. And then this is this stuff is to put your wires in. I'm not gonna show you that. You can figure that out. I use drag chains. I didn't even use that on mine. But we've got a couple of things. We've got stepper motor wires. Now, there's two different ones, so I'm going to point this out. There's a short one and a long one. All right, the short one is for Y, and the long one is for X. Because X can go all the way over here. Y can't ever go that more than that far. You'll also notice there's two different connectors, so you really can't screw this up, and they only go in one way. Be gentle with these. I've had these pull out, so you want to be careful with them. Don't pull these out by the wire if you have to. Pull them by the connector. Use a little screwdriver and gently pry them out. But that goes in there. And you'll notice on the book, this is super, super important because people get this mixed up. So X, which is where the laser is, goes on the connector in between the laser and the outside stepper, which is Y. So this guy, this one I just plugged in, okay, goes on, and it's probably far, but this connector here in the middle. So there's three connectors, two white and a red. This goes in the middle. Like that. All right. And then this one. So the stepper side is a different connector, and it's wider. So this one goes here. This is Y. And this one plugs in here on the outside. Now, the other one is the laser. So this is laser power. Okay. They give you a short one. I don't know why. You don't need it. You need the long one. Okay. So that plugs in the red connector. And this one is the same on both sides, so it doesn't really matter. Now, this brings us to that last thing, this guy, this board. Now, the manual mentions this in the appendix at the end, but people have mounted this a number of different ways. So, if you just want to use what comes in the box, the idea is to put it here, so it gets plenty of airflow. And there's these big holes here and here and here. You can use, and it doesn't come with the zip ties to do this, but people use like wide zip ties and they go through these holes and around it to hold it in. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of that. So this you can download from Thingiverse. And this is a mount plate for this. So it prints in two parts. You just glue them together with super glue. The holes will help you line, and then I put little marks in the corners. Free. If you have access to a 3D printer, you can download this, print it out. A lot of libraries have them, Makerspaces or Friends, but most of the time people can find access to a 3D printer. This costs almost nothing. It's very little filament. Prints in like an hour or two. But this will fit very perfectly right in here. You can actually just press fit it. Now, I did put holes, so you can put a screw, if you have them, straight through. You don't need to, though. This is nice and snug. Likewise, I put holes here and here to push against here, but you don't. It just clips on. You don't need to. Do note that there's a wide side and a not wide side. The wide side's for the stepper. The thinner side's to clear the laser fan. But the way this mounts, it just snaps right here on the top. and it just pushes right on. You can put screws, but you don't need to. There's no force on this. Of course, I put the board in backwards. It should go this way. Okay. Now, this board does have a power plug and a button. This does not need to be plugged in. It's receiving power through this. Then there's those two wires we disconnected that go to the laser, one for the fan and one for power. So anyway, that sits on there, and again, you just clip it on, and it's nice and sturdy. It doesn't go anywhere. So for free, if you want to download and print it, I'm just going to rest it here. If you want to use the zip ties, just to show it bone stock. This is that cable that we just plugged into the controller. It goes into the red connector on here. That's color coded. It's red on the board. It's red here. When you run it, you want to make sure this power button is pushed in and it stays down. So that would be off. That's on. Just leave it on. You don't ever need to turn this off. The controller will turn this on and off. And we're going to reconnect these. Again, color coded, only go in one way. So yellow goes to yellow. White goes to white. All right, so again, you can zip tie them. You can print and stick this on, which I'll do now just because it looks better. Okay. Yeah, so that is the physical installation of this machine. This stuff can be used to manage this cable. Some people hang this with like a rubber band so that it's kind of out of the way, because this moves back and forth. I did some drag chains, and I'm in my mind I have a V3 I'm kind of working out, but the drag chains are basically these plastic things that mount, this clamps that mount onto the steppers, and then the wires route through them and it holds the wires in place. So it's good. It makes it much neater. But this is the machine. So there's a USB cable that plugs in the controller, there's a power cable that plugs in the controller, and that goes to your laptop. And then there's some software you have to install and some drivers. But mechanically, this machine is complete at this point. You can see we're at software. So I did things a little out of order, but again, I explained why. Hopefully, if people watch this video, it will help them understand the mechanics and how this all works. So just again, looking at the machine, the board's in the back right. The stepper for Y, this is Y, this way and that way, is on the right side. The laser's always in front. The bar for the gantry should be on the back of the A and B plates. The stepper on the back of the gantry plate. And then these feed around these 2040 plates, and this feeds around the gantry plate. So hopefully this helps folks understand how to put this machine together. This was a long video, I know, but I did want to be verbose. I wanted everyone to see step by step. I didn't skip anything. You know, this is a candid video. You know, so hopefully everyone appreciates this. And if you have any questions, the group on Facebook is very active. I'm there, as is Jim and others supporting folks. So by all means, if you have any questions at all, reach out. But hopefully you've enjoyed this, and let us know if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Jungle.